The Echo Chamber, a short story by Misty Hamilton Smith. Copyright 2025. Brindlehollow had no clocks. Not anymore. Their absence hung in the air like a held breath, pressing down on the town's chest with invisible fingers. You could feel it in your bones. That hollow ache where rhythm used to live. The silence crawled under your skin and made a home there, settling deep like winter cold that never quite leaves. The townspeople remembered the sound, tick-tock, tick-tock, a heartbeat that once tethered them to something real. Now there was only the whisper of wind through empty clock towers and the soft creak of weather vanes spinning without purpose. They'd all stopped the night the sky cracked open like an eggshell, spilling stars that fell like burning snow across the cobblestones. The air had tasted of copper and ozone that night, sharp on the tongue, while the ground trembled beneath their feet as if the earth itself was sobbing. Memories of that night clung to everything, the way smoke clings to fabric, the way salt clings to skin after tears have dried. You could taste it in the morning mist that rolled through the streets like ghostly fingers, searching for something lost. Since then, time moved like honey in winter, slow, sticky, and unpredictable. Mornings stretched endlessly, each second heavy as lead, while evenings slipped away like water through cupped hands. Sometimes time stopped altogether, leaving people frozen mid-step, mid-breath, caught in amber moments that refused to end. Mrs. Hartwell had been pouring tea for 3 hours yesterday, liquid suspended mid-air like a golden thread, trembling with time's refusal to pass. Young Thomas found himself trapped mid-laugh at the schoolyard. His joy crystallized until the spell broke and left him gasping, confused, reaching for a moment that had already passed. In the heart of the town stood the Echo Vault, a sealed chamber buried beneath the old observatory like a secret the earth was trying to keep. Ivy crawled across its entrance with desperate fingers, and dead leaves gathered in its corners, rustling with voices that might have been wind. The stones were older than memory, worn smooth by countless hands that no one could recall. It smelled of deep earth and forgotten things, mushrooms and moss and the metallic tang of old coins. No one remembered who had built it. The knowledge had been scraped from their minds like frost from glass, leaving only the sharp awareness that something important was missing. They avoided it the way children avoid dark closets, crossing the street rather than walk too close. It pulled at them, though, a gravity they couldn't name, tugging at the hollow spaces in their chests, except for Solen. She wasn't from Brindlehollow, and it showed in everything. The way she walked with purpose while others drifted, the way her eyes focused on things instead of sliding past them like oil and water. Her skin held the warmth of distant places, sun-kissed in a way that spoke of roads traveled and horizons chased. When she breathed, you could almost smell the outside world on her. Pine forests and ocean salt, and the clean bite of mountain air. She arrived on a Tuesday that felt like Thursday, off-kilter like the town itself. Her satchel clinked with each step. Inside, dozens of broken watches, their faces cracked like spiderwebs, their hands frozen at moments that mattered to someone. Somewhere, the metal was warm against her palms. Echoes of lives measured, moments held and lost. A pocket watch with a dented case that had counted a grandfather's last breaths. A delicate lady's timepiece that had stopped the moment true love was found, then lost again. The letter crinkled between her fingers as she read it for the 100th time. Find the vault. Fix what was lost. The ink had faded to bruise purple, the paper fragile as butterfly wings. Soft, trembling, impossible to forget. It smelled like her mother's perfume, lavender and vanilla and grief that had settled into the very fibers. Each time she touched it, she could feel the tremor in the hand that had written it, the desperate weight of hope pressed into every curve of every letter. The townsfolk watched her with eyes like startled deer, all white and wariness. They whispered in doorways and behind curtains, their voices rustling like autumn leaves. She caught fragments as she passed. Vault's curse, swallows time, spits out, ghosts their breath, misted in the air between them, even though the day was warm, as if speaking of the vault brought winter into their lungs. Old Henrik spat into the dust and muttered something about outsiders and trouble. Mrs. Chen clutched her shawl tighter and made the sign against evil with gnarled fingers. The baker's boy, who couldn't be more than 12, stopped kneading his dough to stare, flour dusting his dark hair like premature snow. "Don't go, Theramis," called Martha from her porch, voice thin as paper. "Nothing good comes from that place. Nothing but echoes and emptiness." Solen didn't care. She'd built walls around her heart, brick by careful brick, each one mortared with purpose. Let them whisper, let them stare. She'd lost something too. Her brother Aaron, whose laugh used to fill rooms like sunlight, who vanished mid-sentence one summer evening while they sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance. One moment he was there, solid and warm and real, telling her about the book he was reading. The next, gone. Not dead, gone. Erased from the world like chalk from a blackboard, leaving only the shape of his absence behind. She'd searched everywhere, posted flyers with his face until the rain washed them into grey smears, called his name until her throat bled, followed every lead, every whisper, every desperate hope. All roads led here, to this broken town and its sealed vault and the promises written in her mother's shaking hand. Every night she played the recording she'd found in his room, a voice memo he'd left on his phone, probably by accident. 3 seconds of him saying, "You're almost there. Soul, don't stop." His voice wrapped around her in the darkness like a blanket she'd had since childhood, worn soft with love and use. She'd played it so many times the words had become prayer, mantra, lifeline. Each repetition carved them deeper into her soul, until she could feel them moving in her blood, pushing her forward when everything else told her to turn back. The vault door bore constellations that no longer matched the sky. Star maps to nowhere etched in stone, forgotten by time. The carved lines felt rough under her fingertips, worn smooth in some places by hands she couldn't imagine. The stone was cold, despite the day's warmth, and it seemed to hum with barely contained energy that made her teeth ache. Solen knelt before it, unpacking her watches with trembling hands. Each one felt heavier than it should, weighted with the gravity of stopped moments. She arranged them according to the patterns carved above. Ursa Major here, Cassiopeia there, Orion with his belt of crystal faces. The metal clicked against stone like tiny bells tolling, and with each connection, something shifted in the air around her. The watches began to tick, not together, each keeping its own rhythm, its own broken time, but alive. The sound was like rainfall on roof tiles, like dozens of tiny hearts beating in unison and discord. The vault door shuddered, groaned, and slowly, so slowly, swung open on hinges that screamed with rust and disuse. Cold air rushed out, carrying scents of deep earth and older things, mushrooms and metal and something that might have been starlight, if starlight had a smell. Solen's breath caught in her throat as the darkness beyond beckoned. Inside, silence. Not the absence of sound, but silence as a living thing, thick and patient and hungry. It pressed against her eardrums until they popped, crawled into her mouth and nose until she had to force herself to breathe. This wasn't the quiet of an empty room. This was the silence between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the moment before you fall and the moment you realize you're falling. Her footsteps echoed strangely, each one fracturing into harmonies that didn't belong to her. Step, 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 became a chorus of phantom feet, as if she walked alongside ghosts of everyone who'd ever entered this place. The air tasted of copper pennies and old prayers, thick enough to chew. The chamber stretched farther than it should have, walls disappearing into darkness that her flashlight couldn't penetrate. But she didn't need light to see what waited for her. They hung in the air like dust motes, caught in sunbeam, echoes made visible. Moments crystallized into something between memory and dream. A child's laugh burst past her ear, bright as summer morning, gone before she could turn toward it. An old woman's sigh settled on her shoulders like a shawl. Somewhere in the darkness, someone was humming a lullaby she remembered from her own childhood. The melody weaving through the silence, like golden thread through black fabric. She walked deeper, hands outstretched, feeling her way through moments suspended like breath. Her fingers brushed against warmth that might have been a first kiss, cold that could have been a last goodbye. Each echo she touched left traces on her skin, salt from tears she'd never cried. Laughter that bubbled up from her chest unbidden. Sorrow that wasn't her own, but felt familiar anyway. And then she found him. Erin's echo flickered in the darkness like a candle flame in wind, unstable and heartbreakingly familiar. He looked exactly as he had that last night. 23 years old, brown hair falling into his eyes, wearing the blue shirt with the hole near the collar that he'd refused to throw away. But he was translucent now, more idea than substance, a photographed double exposed with starlight. Her heart clenched so hard she gasped, the sound sharp in the thick air. "Iren." He turned toward her voice, and his smile was exactly the same, crooked on the left side, crinkling his eyes. But when he spoke, his voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off walls that might not exist. "Why did you come?" The words held weight, pressing down on her chest like stones. Not accusation. Wonder, fear, hope so fragile it might shatter if she breathed too hard to bring you back. Her voice cracked like glass. Words torn from the vault inside her, where grief had been shelved like sacred relics. "You can't." The sadness in his tone was an ocean, vast and deep and salt-bitter. It filled the space between them until she could taste it on her tongue. I'm not really here, Sol. I'm just what's left behind. An echo of an echo. But I can remember." The words came fierce and desperate, clawing their way out of her throat. "I can remember every stupid joke you told, every time you made me laugh when I wanted to cry. I can remember the way you hummed when you cooked, off-key and completely confident. I can remember the scar on your knee from when you fell off your bike trying to impress Sally Morrison, and how you cried for an hour even though it barely bled. I remember, Iren. I remember all of it." The vault pulsed around them, walls breathing like lungs, like a heart learning to beat again. Her watches exploded all at once, crystal faces shattering into diamonds that caught the light that wasn't there. Gears and springs cascading to the floor like metallic rain. Time scattered everywhere. Glittering fragments of moments that had been and might have been and never were. The echoes surged toward her then. Not to hurt, but to comfort, to acknowledge. To say yes, this matters, this remembering. This love that refuses to let go. They wrapped around her like embraces from everyone who'd ever been lost. Everyone who'd ever been mourned. Everyone who lived on only in the fierce grip of memory. Solen felt them settling into her bones, her blood, her breath. Not ghosts, something better. Proof that love is stronger than absence, that some things can't be taken away, no matter how the world tries to erase them. Iren's echo smiled one last time, already fading, becoming light, becoming air, becoming memory. "Don't stop, Sol," he whispered, and his voice was the wind and the rain and the turning of the world. "Don't ever stop." When she emerged at dawn, the sky was the color of pearls and promise. Her satchel hung empty against her hip, but her chest felt full to bursting with voices and laughter and love that had nowhere else to live. Her skin hummed with borrowed heartbeats, her eyes held depths that hadn't been there before. Centuries of grief and joy, and the space between them where hope lives. Behind her, the vault door swung shut with a sound like satisfied breathing. Brindlehollow's clocks began to tick again, all at once, like breath held too long, finally released. The sound rippled through the town like water, like relief, like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. Time settled back into its familiar rhythm, imperfect, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, but real, present, alive. Solen walked through the streets as the town woke around her, and wherever her shadow fell, the clocks kept perfect time. Not because she controlled them, but because she carried something they recognized. The weight of remembering, the gravity of love that refuses to be diminished by loss. She would leave soon. There were other vaults, other echoes, other people who needed to learn that some things are too important to let go. But for now, she walked through a town that had found its heartbeat again, carrying her brother's laughter in her chest like a secret worth keeping. The morning mist parted before her like curtains, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed the hour, right on time. Thanks for stepping into the quiet. If this story left something echoing in you, drop it in the comments. More fiction, more feelings, and more strange little worlds are on the way. Subscribe if you'd like to stay tangled in the ink, and don't forget to visit Misty Hamilton Smith at mistyhamiltonsmith.com.